Hi everybody and welcome back. I'm Nina and we're here with the Charlton Chief of Police, Chief Dowd. Hello. And thank you for joining us today. Simple question, but when you were younger, what did you want to be? Because I'm assuming, correct me if I'm wrong, but you didn't always want to be the Chief of Police, or tell us your story, I guess.
Kind of flip-flopped. As a kid, I think I wanted to be a veterinarian, and but my dad was a police officer in Worcester, so I think I always had a desire to be in law enforcement, but it wasn't the only thing I was interested in. And obviously, I'm not dunking on a basketball court or anything where I thought I had aspirations of being a professional athlete, so it was either veterinarian or police. That's it.
So what's the process of becoming the police? So how did you make your way up to being the Chief of Police?
I got lucky, I guess, or unlucky, depending upon your perspective. No, it was something I went to college for. I went to Northeastern University and got a four-year degree there, and then I went back and got, later on, after working here, I got my master's degree in criminal justice and started a second master's degree in public administration, which I'm probably about 3 classes shy of. Now I'm procrastinating. I was in the military. I thought it would give me a step up just to have, be familiar with what the police academy was going to be like. So I was in the military. I worked at the sheriff's department for approximately 10 years before I got on as a police department, and then that started the progression of my career.
Yeah. Well, thank you for your service. You're just memorial day. So can you just briefly explain your everyday life as the chief?
Excuse me. Being the police chief is nothing like that I ever wanted to, dreamt of doing, because it's a lot more administrative stuff than the actual fun stuff of being a police officer. A lot of times you're out answering calls, you get to meet people, it's an enjoyable, can be a very rewarding profession, and now I'm making sure the department has toilet paper and the windows are washed and things that are much more, basically in charge of the building. So there's always something we're working on. I got to make sure there's staffing, so it's a lot more budgetary stuff than that's not what interests me as a kid. I never thought, oh boy, how can I find more toilet paper?
So what interested you as a kid?
What's that?
What interested you as a kid?
Just being a police officer, not being a police chief, and the stuff that you get involved in. It's a small department, so it's very much, running the budget and creating a budget. I have help, but we work on a budget, and we try to get services and maintain services that are being offered, and try to address citizens' needs and complaints.
Oh, that's interesting. Let's see. Charlton, pretty decent-sized town, especially compared to the one surrounding. But what would you say the criminal rate is here? High, low?
Well, it's a low criminal rate, but I think one of the best things we have going for us is there's a lot of space between neighbors. When you live in a 3-decker community, I grew up in Worcester as a child, you're a lot more on top of each other. There's a lot more interactions with people. If you don't get along, you're exposed to each other. We still have neighborhood disputes here, but usually an acre or two between you kind of quells a lot of the day-to-day. You're not constantly encountering the same person on the same set of stairs or jumping on the same elevator.
Spaced out.
Spaced out.
Big. I came from Dudley. I did not notice how big compared it is, because we just moved to Charlton in October.
Area-wise, it's a very large community. I think it's the second largest in Massachusetts in area.
Yep. I was very shocked. I was like, to get to the other side is 20 minutes.
Well, that's the problem when you're running a police department logistically. If I've got a couple officers working, because we're a small town, and somebody's calling for somebody, it could be 10, 15 minutes before.
A long time.
So we depend upon our neighbors and mutual aid and the state police. So a lot of times we monitor each other's calls, and we, obviously, when somebody's yelling help, the more people that show up, the better.
So going off the large distance, do you think it would be beneficial for the police department in the future to have, let's say, maybe multiple or a bigger police department? Do you think?
If we had a different size population, absolutely. The fire department has needs that they might say, hey, it makes sense for us to have a substation, because they would just house the equipment there. Well, not necessarily the manpower. We're not big enough for a city where you might have an office downstairs, an officer in a further section away of the city. We're just not there at this point.
Area?
We've got area to cover, but it just can't justify it. Sometimes, depending on staffing, we're only running 2 or 3 people. So, and then a lot of times, if there's an arrest or something, that ties up 2 officers. So that leaves a large area for one person to cover.
Yeah, small population density. So, I've heard from my mom say. But But you said about arrests. So can you like walk through the procedure of an arrest? Just so I'm curious. Just,
Well, Charlton's not unique. Every
Yeah.
town has warrants
Yep.
and domestics and arrests that get made just by, people have fist fights and everything. So there are arrests. I mean, we're not heavy on arrests where I say, hey, that's our first response. A lot of times we hope to resolve it,
Oh, yeah,
summons
100%.
them,
Oh, yeah.
not arrest them, but some things like warrants and domestics, we don't have a choice. It becomes
Yep.
an arrest. So that's a process. Arresting somebody, obviously, that's not a happy time for that
Oh,
person. So
yeah.
that's why it behooves us procedurally to have two people on.
Mm-hmm.
So what they normally do is a booking period. They got to make sure when they're being booked that that procedure, that they don't have any weapons on them,
Mm-hmm.
that they're fingerprinted and properly identified. Because believe it or not, people occasionally lie to us. And they'll tell us a different name, or
Yeah.
they'll say they're their brother, and all those things to not get in trouble
Yep.
or not be arrested. And we have to verify all those things. Now, it's different if we've dealt with the person several times. We already know who they are. It's a small town. But when you encounter somebody on a motor vehicle stop, you may never have encountered them before. So when they don't have a license, it usually rises an officer's suspicion. They ask them a few questions. So
Yep.
sometimes the motor vehicle stop might last a little longer because they're not handing an ID, or they hand an ID and they look like somebody else, which happens. So
you gotta make sure you got the right person.
now, arrests. We
Yeah.
do try to avoid arrests because obviously the most times people commit suicide is when they're in lockup.
Oh,
So obviously there's always a danger when we bring somebody in. When we're dealing with juveniles, there's a special process for them that they don't stay at the Charlton Police Department. They go to a facility where they can monitor juveniles. But a lot of times if I have somebody that's suicidal once in custody, I've either, depending on their demeanor,
Yep.
they're either got to be watched or I got to bring them to the hospital depending on their injuries. So that's why staffing becomes an issue. And that's why I
Yep.
say it normally ties up two people for a period of time.
Got it. Juvenile arrests. So would you say, I know there's a low criminal rate, did you say? Or not low criminal rate? But is there a lot of juvenile arrests? Or not arrests, but
Interaction?
yeah, interaction, would you say?
So basically, we try not to criminalize juvenile activity. However, some things do arise to a crime, and then they're normally, what we normally would do, as long as we can be left with a proper person or a guardian or a parent that's going to
Yep.
be responsible for them, they normally stay with them. But if somebody ever committed a crime so heinous, a murder,
Yeah.
that's obviously not an option on the table.
Exactly.
So then we refer to, well, like I said, there's a lockup facility for juveniles, and we
Yeah.
confer with the district attorney's office, and we confer with juvenile probation, and we catch out a plan.
But would you say like juvenile is more common than adults?
No,
No?
not
No?
even close.
Not even close?
A lot of the crimes for juveniles have been basically decriminalized,
Yep.
and then, the thought process was putting a juvenile through the criminal justice system is difficult on them.
Yeah,
So
very.
you try to avoid putting them in that position where they're not able to handle it. And then the other thing is labeling a kid a bad kid also they soon start to think they are a bad
Yeah.
kid and the behavior follows. So ultimately we try to summons, refer them to the Dudley court, but obviously I can't have like a juvenile going around breaking into your car and not do anything about it.
Exactly,
So sometimes you
yeah.
make the team.
You got it. Yeah, that makes sense. So COVID-19, just now I would say dialing down. Vaccines are coming out, everything of a sort. Did you see a change throughout this past year in like criminal activity?
Yeah,
or?
so when COVID first hit, obviously, like everybody else,
Yep.
we didn't know what we didn't know.
Exactly.
So a lot of people like myself initially thought, oh, after 2 weeks this will just blow over. Well, that's
Yep.
not how it worked. And
2 weeks turned into
well,
over a year.
There we go. That's what
Yeah.
happened. And then was it a death sentence?
Yeah.
And then we found out a lot of people had no symptoms, and it was maybe overhyped. And then, unfortunately, some people had adverse effects from COVID and actually died. So I'm concerned. So I told the officers that I wanted to not to make arrests unless it was imperative, because
Yep.
there was no reason to expose that person that was arrested or the officers and their families to COVID unnecessarily. But I also didn't need our officers to be masked up and deal when they have to deal with the public, because I don't want them going over and killing somebody in a nursing home
Exactly.
because they responded. Now, the fire department did us a real solid, and they have more, at the time, they had better gear as far as dealing with COVID, masks and respirators, depending upon the situation, and they were able to take a lot of the medical calls that we would normally jump on. So we stepped back.
You step back a little bit.
And allowed the fire department to do their job.
That's
But
good.
in the
Teamwork.
past, if there was an accident,
Yeah.
we're all trained to be.
Oh, yeah.
We also initial medical experience so that we can at least do some initial first aid and things like that. But I would, if it can wait, let the fire department handle
Exactly.
it. But now we're coming back to more of a normalcy.
Normal life is almost there, I would say, which is great. Finally, it's been a while. But one more question, just for, let's say, like high school students. I know a lot of kids at my high school, the Shepherd Hill, are interested in like criminal justice, and a lot are in the. You have a criminal justice program at the police department. Do you not? Or
They used to have an Explorer post, but that officer that did a lot of work with that post has since retired, and it's just difficult to get somebody to commit to that type of commitment. Apologize about the phone.
No,
ringing.
it's okay. It's okay. Busy man.
Well, I don't know about that, but it always rings. They're probably just so.
Because I actually took part of the Explorer program sophomore year, but right before COVID happened. But then.
So that
happens,
officer
so yeah.
obviously spent a lot of time on that
Yeah.
program. So that was the hard thing,
Yeah.
is to find somebody. Now, people's, as their life goes on, they might be great at it, but they got little kids, so they
Yeah.
can't free themselves up, or they're now they got another commitment or something, so that they can't do it. So it's hard to find somebody that would spend the amount of time. But he did for
Exactly.
years, and we were very fortunate to have him running the program. But he spent a lot of time, his wife too, because obviously if you're spending that kind of time, your spouse has got to be willing to sacrifice
Yeah,
that or
exactly.
join you, and she joined him and helped him out. So there was a lot.
It was an awesome program.
Yeah.
But I was going with that with what are some like tips or advice you would give to high school students or even college students that want to pursue a career like yours? Any?
Oh, it's difficult because I tell you this, Charlton happens to be civil service, so there's a process that involves taking the civil service exam. So I can't just bring somebody on just because they would do a great job, or they might want to be a police officer. They have to take an exam. The exam results come out. However they fall, and then there's a procedure. If I ask for, I'm hiring one person, I may get a list of 3 names.
Okay.
And I have to decide from those 3 why and why not if I don't pass. If I bypass them, I have to come up with an explanation.
Got it.
So civil service kind of hampers us. Now, some other departments do that are non-civil service. They bring people on and they train them as a part-timer, and they get their foot in the door. So sometimes that's a very idea of I'm not sure if I want to do this profession or not. It gives them at least to put their toe in the water and to try it out a little bit. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. It's very difficult right now because of police reform.
Yep.
So there's basically what police reform is bringing. There used to be a part-time academy and a full-time academy. Well, they're making them almost be, because of police reform, the same amount of hours.
Okay.
So it's very difficult for me to say to somebody, hey, I want to do this part-time, and then tell them that they have to do hundreds and hundreds of hours just to be able to try the job.
Yep.
It's a big commitment right out of the gate. So it's just changing things, police reform. Probably for the best, but initially for us, it's a learning curve. So it's going to be very difficult to get police recruits in the future, because right now they're not offering a part-time academy because they don't know what it should look like. So, and we're trying to get our part-time people. We have a couple that are auxiliaries, and they fill out they'll do like traffic details and stuff for us. We got to get those people trained in order to keep their certification, which previously never had to be done.
Oh, a new thing.
Right.
All right. Well, that's all I have for today.
I must be able to screw something else up.
No, you didn't.
All right.
You were great. Well, thank you for joining us today.
All right. Well, that was relatively painless. I haven't tripped on this yet.